In these two chapters, in Genesis chapter 34 and chapter 35, we're coming to the end of the spiritual life of Jacob. Jacob is included in the rest of the book of Genesis, but next week, as we get into chapter 36 and 37, the focus goes from Jacob to one of Jacob's 12 sons, and that would be his son Joseph. The last dozen or so chapters of the book of Genesis cover the life of one of my heroes in the faith, and that's Joseph. Now, in our last study in Genesis chapter 32 and chapter 33, Jacob had finally gotten away from his uncle Laban, and Jacob had finally gotten away from his brother Esau also. Even though Esau had forgiven Jacob and was a polite and proper man of the world, Jacob needed to get his family away from those harmful influences that can easily do so much damage to the young, developing minds of the children. The major downfall of Abraham's nephew Lot was that he moved his family right into the heart of those wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot pretty much lost his whole family to sin and judgment. So Jacob would have been very wise to choose the country life over the lights of the big city. In these times, there were no Jewish synagogues, and there were no Christian churches to influence the communities. There were just families and tribes and cities that were, for the most part, very idolatrous. And God was still in the beginning stages of forming even this whole nation of people that he would call his people, the people of God, the Israelites. And so Jacob needed to keep his family, his wives, and his children under the family umbrella as much as he could for their own protection. But he didn't. He allowed his daughter to go into the city where he had settled near to. And this little country girl, who was born and raised on a farm out in the sheep country of Padan Aram, Jacob's daughter Dinah, seems to have gotten caught up in the influences of the ungodly people of the city of Shechem. In Genesis chapter 34, in verse 1, it reads, "And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. And he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with the cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved. And they were very wroth, or very angry, because he had wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. Dinah was the daughter of Leah. Her name means judged, and that's not in a condemning sort of a way, but more like acquitted or vindicated. Dinah was the daughter of Jacob by Leah. She was the younger sister to Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun, her full brothers by blood. Shechem was both the name of the city and the name of the young prince that was there in the city that bore his name. Shechem must have been a big deal in this area, seeing that he was a prince. And he felt as though he could do anything that he wanted to. And he could take anyone he wanted to for his own pleasures. And he did. It reads that Shechem had defiled Dinah, the daughter of Israel. The name Shechem means shoulder. It could be that his father Hamor was looking forward to the time when all the governments of the land would fall upon the shoulders of his son Shechem. The men of Shechem were Hivites, and the Hivites were the descendants of Canaan, the cursed son of Ham. Back in the chapter of the Table of Nations, it reads in Genesis chapter 10, verses 15 through 19, "And Canaan begot Sidon his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite, and afterwards were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, unto Gaza, as thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah." Now, Jacob and his family were right in the middle of these ungodly tribes of the sons of Canaan. So you might ask, how is it that we dwell in a land that's defiled with so much pagan idolatry, just as Jacob and his family did? I feel like America is becoming just like Canaan, and we're dwelling in Shechem, or even in Sodom and Gomorrah. So how is it that you keep your life from becoming defiled with the sins of Sodom, and you stay out of the cities of Shechem? I would say that you do what Jacob should have been very diligent to do with his own family, and that is that you stay within your own kind. And by your own kind, I don't mean by race. It's not by race, but it's by religion. You don't allow your daughters to be enticed by the princes of the big city, but you keep them within the fellowship of other believers. As your children become teenagers, they will want to do the same things that the other teenagers are doing. And that is, they will desire that life of worldly entertainment that doesn't have God as the center of it. They may just want to party with the world and leave God at home with mom and dad. Now, if they've been groomed by television and by the world's philosophy of ungodly morals, if they've been groomed and prepped to embrace the world's immoral behaviors, when you, as their parent, start putting your foot down in their teenage years and demanding that they start living godly, then you're going to come across as if you're just ruining all of their fun. The fun things that they have been anticipating for so many years. The dress, the music, the movies, and possibly even drinking and smoking, and then the boyfriends and the girlfriends. If you wait too long to enforce godliness in your homes, then you just might lose your children in their teen years to the world. And this is the world that's perishing. It seems that Jacob didn't put his foot down to keep his daughter close to home, away from the ungodly influences. He should have created a hunger and a thirst in his daughter when she was younger to delight herself in the Lord. And this goes for all of his sons as well. And unfortunately, even godly parents can neglect to raise their children in the Lord during their most impressionable years. In this whole chapter, Genesis chapter 34, God is not even mentioned, not once. There's no mention of God during this time of Jacob's life. And he's living right in the heart of pagan idolatry. The problem arises in the absence of God's influence in Jacob's home during this time. And unfortunately, the solution to this problem, the solution comes in the absence of God's influence in Jacob's home also. The problem was this sexual intimacy between Shechem and Dinah, between the ungodly Hivite Shechem and what should have been the godly Israelite Dinah. In most Bible commentaries, it reads that Shechem had raped Dinah, but it doesn't say that specifically in the text. In verse 2, it reads that when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. And the phrase, he took her, that could be by force, or it could be that she was just brought into his bed and she may have been a willing participant. But since they weren't married, she was defiled. Shechem defiled Dinah. And I think that the world has this idea that sexual promiscuity is normal, that that's the norm. The television tells us that. The TV shows and the movies, they teach us that. Even some of the kid shows where the kids are around 10 years old and still in grade school, their main focus in these shows is to get hooked up with a boyfriend or with a girlfriend. Hey, you got to turn that stuff off. The television used to be called the idiot box or the boob tube, because the person who vegetates in front of the TV all day long turns out to be a boob or an idiot. And the best way to keep that junk out of your house is to simply turn it off. Now, the law hadn't been established yet in Israel, but the Mosaic law taught that if a man raped a woman in the city, and she cried out for help and was heard and was caught, then that man would be put to death. They were to stone him with stones because he has humbled her and defiled her virginity. And then later on, when she should be married, or when she would be married, she would have no token to prove her virginity. The girl's father would save the bedsheet from her wedding night's consummation so that her husband couldn't accuse her of committing whoredom before they were married. And the father would have the proof of her virginity and the proof of her purity. If the father didn't have that proof, then she could be tried in a court of law, and if she was convicted, they could stone her to death for her harlotry. And this might sound somewhat harsh to us, because we've become so numb to sexual immorality in our day and age. But God hates evil. And when it comes to fornication and adultery, this is how God puts it. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, in verse 22, it reads, "If a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die. both the man that lay with the woman and the woman also. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. And the rapist, they were to receive the death penalty also. And here in our story, before the law was established in Israel, they knew right from wrong. They knew what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong because God wrote his law on their hearts and in their minds. But Shechem's heart, it was so hardened to the law of God that all he does is come after he defiles Dinah to bargain with Jacob and his sons to get Dinah for his bride. In verse 8 it reads, And Hamor communed with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you, give her him to wife. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein. Now, I believe that this is coming across as though these are noblemen. I think that's what they thought. I mean, Shechem doesn't just throw Dinah off to the side, but he wants to marry her and have her as his wife. And it would appear that he's doing the right thing. But the right thing would have been that he would have asked her father first if he could court his daughter Dinah. And then he would have respected the traditions of their family. The world teaches us to sleep together first, and then, if you like that person, then maybe you can get married sometime in the future after you've tried them out for a while. But if not, then you just dump them and you move on to the next immoral relationship. I was counseling with this couple, and they'd been married for about 2 years, and they were on the verge of divorce. And they had already separated, and she indicated that she can't wait for him forever because she needs to have a man at home. And if he wasn't going to be that man, then she said right there on the spot, I got like 4 guys lined up who would all just love to be with me. So you better hurry up and decide what you want to do. And I know she's just trying to pressure him, but I told her in the counseling session that she didn't have to wait. She didn't want to. That she has the liberty to do whatever she pleases. I said, you are a free moral agent, and you can do whatever you decide to do. However, there are consequences to your actions, especially sinful actions. And I told them both that some of those consequences are the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy or a sexually transmitted disease. And then maybe the worst consequence of all, well, besides ending up in hell, but I said maybe the worst consequence of all in this life as believers, because they were both believers, would be a bitter heart against the Lord. Your heart is a precious commodity that you possess, and you should guard your heart dearly. You want it to be soft and tender to the ways of the Lord, not hardened and bitter because of sin and because of the guilt and the shame that comes along with sin. Hamor was enticing Jacob to unite their family with the Hivites because it would be a prosperous business decision on Jacob's behalf. He said, the land will be wide open for you. You can trade with anyone in the land. You'll be prosperous, and your possessions will increase. And We need to watch out for these enticements that don't include the will of the Lord. Even Shechem himself steps in and he tries to sweeten up this deal. In verse 11, it reads, "And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes. And what ye shall say unto me, I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as you shall say unto me. But give me the damsel to wife." See, Shechem was still trying to do what's right, but it was only in his own eyes. He was offering them whatever price they had requested. "I will pay whatever dowry you ask. No bride price is too high. I'm a prince." And you notice that Shechem, he never apologizes or acknowledges that he's done any wrong. And that might be because he didn't think that he did anything wrong. And now he's just here in Jacob's house bargaining for this bride. Verse 13, "And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said, Because he has defiled Dinah their sister, they said unto him, We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. And this will we consent unto you, if you will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters unto us. And we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. And if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter, and we will be gone." Now the commentary in verse 13 tells us that Jacob's sons spoke up in behalf of their sister. And rightfully so, because Jacob never even gets mad at Shechem anywhere in this entire chapter. But Jacob's sons have something up their sleeve to avenge their sister. So the request is that all the Hivite males were to become circumcised. It reads in verse 13 that they were speaking deceitfully. The Hivites, they were not a covenant people. They were not of the sons of Abraham, nor of the sons of Shem, Noah's son. They weren't part of the godly line of men in the world. They were actually part of the cursed men in the world, being the sons of Canaan. They had no portion in God's kingdom unless they became Israelites, if they became circumcised. Then they would also bear the sign of the covenant of God's people, and Jacob's sons tell them that they would be one with them. They said, "We don't want your money. Our concern is a matter of religious practice." But this was deceitful, since they didn't mention the covenant of God and the sign of the covenant by circumcision. All they mentioned was the act of circumcision. And these men of Canaan, who were immoral idol worshippers, saw this as a tribal custom rather than a commitment to Jehovah. Verse 18, "And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young men deferred not to do the thing," or they weren't discouraged from becoming circumcised at all, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father, which doesn't mean much, really. They're all ungodly men. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came unto the gate of their city and communed with the men of their city, saying, "These men are peaceable with us. Therefore let them dwell in the land and trade therein. For the land, behold, it is large enough for them. let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one people. If every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised, shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them that they will dwell with us, and they will dwell with us. And unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of the city. And every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. So Shechem and Hamor were very persuasive with all the men of the city. After all, the city is named Shechem, and he is the prince of the land. And these men all become circumcised at the request of Shechem and Hamor. Now, I wanted to mention something here about religious acts, such as circumcision or the vow of a Nazirite. That was another act of dedication to the Lord in the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, water baptism can also be a religious act, and so can communion or the Lord's Supper. These are acts of worship, and they can be done without a change of heart. That's one of the interesting things about religious acts or religious actions, is that they can be performed without any thought whatsoever of pleasing God. And I mention this because we need to understand that our relationship with the Lord is not wrapped up in just a bunch of religious performances only. Hey, I like religion. I do. I like religion. I think we should all come to church religiously. I think that we should all read our Bibles religiously. And we should be baptized in water. And we should all partake of communion religiously on a regular basis. But those acts within themselves, those actions, are not what separate us or set us apart from the rest of the world. To be separated from the world is to be separated unto the Lord. To be separated unto God means that Jesus has a hold of my heart, and that he has a hold of my thought life also. And in every single thing that I do, I'm looking to please my Lord in my day-to-day life, not in just religious activities alone. And then I live like the devil in my day-to-day life. These men became circumcised in their flesh, but not in their hearts. There was no mention of God as the cause for this religious activity. Their desire wasn't to have fellowship with God, just with the sons of Jacob. And their reward wasn't sweet fellowship with Jehovah, but only to gain the cattle of Israel's substance, and also the souls of their daughters, the daughters of the sons of Jacob. Hamor and Shechem told Jacob that they wanted to be a blessing to them. We'll give you all the land. You'll prosper in it. And then when they go back to the city of Shechem, they turn around and they tell the men of the city, everything that Israel has will be ours if we just become circumcised. And so they did. They complied. But this would be like getting baptized in water and your heart is not set on the things of the Lord. All you may be interested in is the religious act, but not a true change of heart for God. Do you have your sights fixed on the things of the earth or on the things of God? Why do you come to church? Is it just to have a better life in this world? If so, then that's the same reason why the sons of Hamor wanted to be circumcised, just for a better life, for your best life now. That's the title of one of Joel Osteen's books, Your Best Life Now. I couldn't help myself. He deserves to be picked on. He really does. And when it comes to just being religious, I say, why bother? Honestly, I don't get false religion. I don't. If it's fake, why even do it? I'd rather just live like a pagan. I don't understand why people sit through religious services when they're not into the Lord. Now, before I was saved, I believed everything that the Bible had said about Jesus. I believed that it was all true. And Christians would come and they would share with me here and there, and I would say, yes, I agree with you. And when they tell me that I should now start living my life for Jesus, then I would say, no, that's okay. I don't want to change my life right now. I like to sin. You might think, well, that's terrible. And it is. But I was honest. I was stupid. I was dumb. But I was honest. And what's worse than that is when people go to church by religious practice, but they could care less about really pleasing God. And they're deceived into thinking that their Sunday attendance is going to benefit them somehow in the eyes of other people. I don't get it. And people even get baptized or perform other religious acts, but those things by themselves don't change their hearts for the eternal blessings. And the men of Shechem, they just went through all of this pain of becoming circumcised to no benefit whatsoever. Verse 25, and it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their donkeys, which reminds me that Hamor, his name means donkey or jackass. That's what his name means. It's an interesting name, right? What do you want to name him, honey? Hamor. Sounds good. So they took their stuff, that which was in the city and that which was in the field, and all their wealth and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. They think we're foul, is what he said. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? In the New International Version, verse 31 reads, but they replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? And Jacob, he never rebuked Shechem for defiling Dinah in sexual immorality. But he corrects his sons for honoring their family name. But I'm sure that this sent a strong message to the inhabitants of the land that if you treat our sisters with disrespect, you're going to have to deal with us. And I doubt that they had too many problems after this, in this same manner. But Jacob, I believe that Jacob was very backslidden, and his responses showed it. He's more concerned with how he's going to look to the surrounding pagan tribes than the honor of his own daughter. In verse 30, he says that we are few in number, and the inhabitants of the land shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. But God said to Abraham that whoever curses his seed shall be cursed themselves. And God would not fail to multiply Israel's descendants in the earth. Now, I think that Simeon and Levi overdid it, though. This is supposed to be an act of justice, but when one guy commits this act of immorality, even if it was rape, this didn't account for the slaughter of the whole tribe or all the men of the whole city. They definitely overdid it. And Jacob, he never got over what they did. He mentions this event later on, just before his death, when he's pronouncing the blessings upon his sons. In Genesis chapter 49, in verses 5 through 7, Jacob says, Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. My honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. This doesn't sound too much like a blessing from their father. But I love that God trumped Jacob's bitterness against his sons. And Levi became God's ministers in the tabernacle of God, in the tent of meeting. They became the priests in Israel. God loved their zeal for purity. You know, I can't help but to think that the sword will do you in if you only have earthly goals, but you participate in outward religious practices. Those who sit in church services, who are there only for self-improvement, and they hear the word of God, but it doesn't bring them to a life of faith and obedience to the Lord, that same sword that they look to for temporary blessings will pierce them through in judgment. You heard my word, but you never believed. So I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. See, the bride will be delivered, just like Dinah was. But the unbelieving religious people, they won't. You know, I feel like it's Judgment Week this week. I think we've had like 3 or 4 messages in a row that have been on judgment. But let me go back to the practical side of this. And I would encourage you parents to be careful about what you allow your kids to be involved with. I mean, godless activity, whether it's sports or movies or even the TV. That's not really the problem. But listen to this. Living a G-rated life that's not centered around faith and obedience unto the Lord Jesus Christ It may seem harmless, but it'll cost you. It will. It'll cost you. Because whatsoever you sow, that shall you also reap. If you sow to your flesh, even if it's rated G, you'll reap corruption. But if you sow to the Spirit, you'll reap everlasting life. To sow to the flesh will cost you honor and dignity and even purity. In Proverbs 22:6, it reads, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And I would ask, should we as parents pick and choose what our kids watch on TV? Yes, absolutely. Or their time on the internet? Absolutely. Should we pick and choose what friends they hang out with? Yes. Especially while they're young. We need to seek to mold and shape our kids into the things of the Lord, and we should warn our children also about the consequences of ungodly, immoral lifestyles. When they're old enough to start being curious about sin, we should sit down and talk with them about those sins that they seem to be curious about. When they're 5 years old, you don't have the sex talk. But we need to warn them. And you know why? Because I'm not just interested in my kids, but I'm interested in their children's children. And I think that grandpa, great-grandpa, needs to set the godly standard. I don't remember what my great-grandpa did. I haven't heard anything about him on both sides. I know my grandfather on my mother's side, he went to church, Church of Christ, back there in Iowa. He was a good man, and he helped people out. That's all I know. We should leave a great heritage of godliness for our kids and their kids after them. Genesis 35, verse 1, "And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother." Now I just love it that God is so gracious unto his son Jacob. Jacob scolds his boys rather harshly, but God, he encourages Jacob to come back to the place of familiarity and to become reacquainted with his God. He is so gracious. Verse 2, "Then Jacob said unto his household and all that were there with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem." So he stashed them. Now, I also love the effect that God's grace had on Jacob. Sometimes a strong rebuke, it changes us. We get the picture, and we're changed. But most of the time, it's God's loving kindness that purifies our lives. Knowing that he loves us no matter what we do. Many, many times, that's what motivates us to love him back in return and to please him with sincerity and with holiness. In Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 14, it reads, "For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared unto all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. Grace teaches us that. It's grace. Looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearance of the great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people zealous of good works. It's the grace of God that does that, purifies our lives. The fact that Jacob's household had all of these images of false gods in their hands, this shows the depth of their backslidden condition. They were no doubt the strange gods of Shechem. And I would ask you guys to think about the little idols that you have in your own lives. God is so gracious to you. Think about how you can get rid of those things that displease him. An idol, by definition, is something that is worthless. It's nothing. It's of no substance to save you or to bless your life. And if it replaces faith in the invisible God, it's also defined as a horrible thing or a horrid thing. We are to keep ourselves from idols. So Jacob flees from Shechem, and God tells him where to go. Go to Bethel and be restored. And now Jacob and his family are on the move. In verse 5 it reads, "And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about him. And they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob." And this seems like an ongoing pattern in Jacob's life. Again, Jacob was afraid, and God still has his hand upon his life. Remember that God had terrified Laban in a dream, so that he and his men couldn't do anything against Jacob. And Laban couldn't say anything to him. So it could have been that God had terrified the inhabitants around that area also, because I doubt that the people were just afraid of Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi weren't even that brave themselves. They had to wait for the house of Shechem to be in sore pain from the circumcision before they attacked them at their weakest hour. So I believe that the surrounding communities, they feared Jacob's God rather than Jacob's sons. Verse 6, "So Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan." He's been here before. That is Bethel. He and all the people that were with him, and he built there an altar and called the place El Bethel, because their God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. You see here that God comforts Jacob by reminding him of some of his past blessings and times of deliverance. And I think it's good to reflect upon all that the Lord has done for us in the past. And we should reflect on those things, those good things of the Lord often. In Psalm 103, verses 2 through 5, it reads, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all of his benefits, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles." We're so undeserving, but God is so gracious. And Jacob was blessed to be in Christ, or under the shadow of the wings of the Almighty. In verse 7, he builds an altar, showing his faith in sacrifice. And he called the place El Bethel, which means the mighty God of the house of God. Verse 8, but Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak. And the name of it was called Alon Bakuth. And Alon Bakuth means oak of weeping. Deborah was Jacob's mother's handmaid. She was Rebekah's handmaid. So Jacob, he probably saw her as a mother figure. He had known her for his whole life. And I'm sure that she was instrumental in raising both Jacob and Esau. Verse 9, and God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said unto him, thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And Jacob went up from him in the place where he talked with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him, Bethel. Now, this sounds just like we jump back a few chapters, but God is simply confirming the call on Jacob's life, reminding him of his purposes in him and his blessings upon him. And once again, Jacob worships. The drink offering, it could be a memorial, though, of the death of Deborah. Here I see God as a God of great compassion in this chapter. He loves Jacob, even in his frailty. And he builds him up when Jacob is weak and filled with sorrow. Death seems to surround him in these last two chapters, and God is there to comfort him in his sorrow and in his weakness, even strengthening him with the reminder of his spiritual name, Israel, a mighty prince in the earth who has wrestled with both God and man and has prevailed. And Jacob, he needed this encouragement from God. In verse 16 it reads, and they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, which is a place just near Bethel. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. She was with child. And it came to pass when she was in hard labor that the midwife said unto her, fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. So Jacob was already heartbroken that Deborah had died. And now Jacob loses the bride that he was so in love with, the wife that had his heart, and that was Rachel. And what a tragedy to have a son who would always remind you of your wife's death. They didn't have the same medical practices back then as we do today, so they couldn't perform a C-section. And these complications in labor, they killed Rachel as her son was delivered. And as she was dying, she names her son Benoni, which means son of my sorrow. And I believe that Jacob, he was strengthened by the Lord because he wouldn't accept this grievous name for his son. And he changes it to Benjamin, which means son of my right hand, which is a son of blessing, rather than a son of sorrow. And Benjamin was a blessing. The Apostle Paul was born of the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 21, and Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar, this tower outside of Bethel. It was a shepherd's tower to watch out for the flocks and the herds. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan, and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad, and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Padan Aram. This list of 12 names are what is called the patriarchs of the Old Testament. These men are the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. And these 12 men and their descendants make up the nation of God's people, the nation of Israel. As we go from here in Genesis and then get more into the book of Joshua, we'll see that God works through a physical, geographical nation in the Old Testament. And then God works through a spiritual group of people in the New Testament that are made up of all the various nations of the world. In the Old Testament, in Exodus 19:6, it reads, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and holy nation. And in the New Testament, in 1 Peter 2:9, it reads, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Both Israel in the Old and the church in the New, they both speak of our glorious relationship to Jehovah or to Jesus. Now, in a time of great sadness, which was the death of Deborah and the death of Rachel, if Jacob didn't have enough heartbreaking news, verse 22, it reads that Jacob learns that his own son Reuben has had an affair with Bilhah. And he doesn't respond to that here, but once again, as he nears death, he remembers this deed of Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. In Genesis 49:3-4, he says, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power, unstable as water. Thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. And I wonder if Jacob held his peace at this time because Reuben was his firstborn. And this deed was another painful reminder of his own deceit against Esau. Verse 27, and Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180 years. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. And his son Esau and Jacob buried him. Now, Jacob was traveling quite a bit in these 2 chapters. He may have been trying to keep his mind preoccupied because of all the death and the mayhem that was going on around him. In verse 27, he makes it back to his father's house in Mamre, but Isaac also passes away at 180 years old. And they buried him with his wife Rebekah and his mother and his father Abraham and Sarah. just like it reads in Genesis chapter 49 in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah. I think that as you get older, death becomes more and more of a grim reality as we begin to see many of our loved ones pass away all around us. And that reality, it should give us all that longing for eternal life, where there is no death and where there is no sorrow. And we don't just sit around, though, while we're still alive and wait for death, but we live presently in this time very purposefully. Right here and right now, we live our lives for Jesus. And as we went over in the previous chapter, we teach our kids to do the same. In their future generations, we want them to have their hearts set on eternity also.